So I'm Dan Scott from Laurentian University up in Sudbury, Ontario. Very happy to be here in this beautiful weather. And some of you may know me from the Code4Lib channel as the guy who is the, well, I don't know, self-appointed defender of PHP or something like that. In reality, I actually like to program in Python and Perl probably more than PHP, but that just happens to be the environment that I'm in right now. And I found when I joined the library world in March of last year that there wasn't really a great Mark parsing library for PHP, so I set out to try and fill that hole. Notice that I've been reading Eastern Standard Tribe by Cory Doctorow. I consider myself part of the Code4Lib tribe. So there is now an alpha version of this Mark library for PHP. So for all the people out there, I noticed that at the Solar Precon, that the Team PHP was actually by far the greatest number of people that were participating. I'm not sure what you've been using in the past, but I know that there was milda.org or milda.dk had produced a PHP Mark module. When I picked that up, I found it was, for my needs, it didn't meet my needs. It was really a Mark reading library, and it didn't allow for modification or the kinds of modifications that you needed. It could only append subfields, for example. You wouldn't be able to insert it at the proper point within a given field. The core parsing routines that the milda.org's module actually relied on came from FileMark and Perl, so thank you Ed and the others who have worked on that. So you know that it's on a solid base. I basically took that core, had the blessing of Milda to relicense this as LGPL to add to the pair library, and stripped away all the rest of the interface and built up what I think is a nice object-oriented API for it. So why did I want to do this? I wanted to get this out into pair so that people didn't have to go to non-standard places to find a library. Hopefully everybody wouldn't have to rewrite this themselves. Pair has coding standards, whether you like them or not. At least it's something that you can rely upon. I added unit tests. There's still more to add, but at least I've got a level of certainty that if anything could change, I'm not going to bust something. And I also kind of wanted to prove that PHP doesn't have to be ugly. PHP often ends up being ugly, but can actually be a fairly nice interface. So the basic features, we can read from pretty much any source. PHP has this nice built-in capability to read from compressed streams. So if you've got a gzip file or a zip file, you can actually read directly from that. So our library's 500 megabytes of raw Mark data can fit into about 128 megs zipped, and I can read from that instead of taking up valuable space on my hard drive for videos or whatever. It reads Mark 21 and Mark XML, understands both of them, and the interface for manipulating, reading, etc. is exactly the same for both those sources. For searching, you have the choice of either retrieving just the first fields in a record that matches or an entire array of fields that match your search. You can use regular expressions or exact strings. You can add fields and subfields at any point within the record, before, after. It's pretty straightforward. By default, it's just going to append at the end, but you've got control. You can iterate through using the for each operator, and if you're iterating through fields, then you can get the key and the subfields, sorry, the tag and the subfields as the key value. Or subfields, you'll get the code and the data. There is a raw Mark output, which works really well. There's a Mark XML output, which works as long as your input data is UTF-8. There is no support in PHP for good encoding transformations. So I'm really hoping that in PHP 6, that ICU, the engine that's going to be used, will hopefully understand Ansel and Mark 8, and maybe that can be a subject of another lightning talk or urgency for the Google Summer of Code4Lib projects to try and add Ansel and Mark 8 support to the core Icon V and ICU engines of the world. So feel free to try it out. It's in alpha, so all you need to do is install, to install it is to type pair install file_mark-alpha to indicate it. But pair tried to prevent you from installing anything that might be slightly flaky software, so install this flaky software. You can read about it at pair.php.net/filemark. There actually is some documentation that I've written. I need to add more. That's number 3 on the next steps. I need to go back and fix some of the exceptions that I throw when our vendors Mark data happily blows, or sorry, blows. Our vendors Mark data blows. Our Mark data that we've added the vendor doesn't enforce most of the MARC standards, so there's bad stuff there. I'd really love to get feedback from you if you're using this, because I would really like to iterate this and make it better and better. And I hope to get a 1.0 release out sometime